What is up, my beautiful life family? I love you. I love you. It's a beautiful day. I hope you guys are having a beautiful Monday. I wanted to hop on to share with you my story around rage and anger. I remember once somebody asked me, do you ever get angry? And I was laughing because I was like, you don't understand what a huge component that was to my life. It was a huge part of a behavioral pattern I was in. And so I want to share with you how that started and then share with you the ways that I've been able to work through them, because anger, when it is guided at anything, misguided or guided at anything or anyone, causes great damage to self and to others. It has caused wars. It has caused... it's caused a lot of separation on this planet. And, you know, anger is a secondary emotion. And so if we can really understand what that means that there's something underneath it. There's always another feeling or emotion underneath the anger. And that's the place. That's what needs to be expressed. Yes, we need to scream and yell. And I'm gonna share with you my safe way of doing so. But it's very important that we understand that there's something else going on for it to create this explosion. Again, there's nothing wrong with being angry. It's when we take it and we direct it in some way is where we create even more separation to ourselves, with ourselves, and separation between each other, and almost to the point where if these things are not expressed and they're expressed through anger, you're seeing violence, right? So when I was younger, you know, my family, you know, had a lot of their issues, and they didn't really know how to express what was going on for them. They kind of learned how to, and I think this was their generation, was kind of like, you just suck it up and you be grateful for what you have. And I remember that. It was like, you know, I would try to share my feelings, and it was like, yeah, but you have it better than most. And I was trained, right? And my parents, as they were trained, to not express those things, not express negativity, because it was better just to stay positive, which was completely spiritually bypassing. And I was stuffing and denying self. And when we deny self, we start to implode with emotion, and there's no space in the body for that, right? It starts, you're pushing it down, you're pushing it down. And then I have, you know, a lot of trauma in my story, a lot of abuse and things that I witnessed, and, you know, a lot of neglect and different things, right? And so as I'm in this experience, I can remember when I was about 9 years old, I remember running up the steps, and I had that explosion moment, that rage moment where I blacked out. And I remember it was the first time I stood up to, like, my dad, for instance, and I just unloaded. Like, I don't even remember what I said. I know I cursed a lot. I called him a bunch of names, and it just started to come out, and it was powerful. I felt a release. I felt really strong. And no one really yelled at my dad. My dad was a tough dude, right? He's still a tough guy. I used to call him Superman. And so, but I felt like, ooh, there you are. And for the time being, I needed to do that. I probably would have, I was leaning towards starting to hurt myself in the way I was looking at things, and I was getting really depressed, and I was getting really anxious. And, you know, I was, you know, I drank around 7. I started to dabble here and there with alcohol to kind of allow myself to deal with all these emotions. So I have this moment of rage. And since that moment, I remember that strength that came from it, this power that I felt. And I latched onto it, and I was like, wow. And I wanted to re-experience that, not knowing that the only reason it felt so good was I finally got it out. It finally started to come out. But what I started to use it for was when I was in fear, or I was hurt, or I was, I was fearful. And so I would get very aggressive, and this was my protection, and this is the way I dealt with things. And so as time went on, I became more and more angry. And the more I was out of alignment in my life, and the more I made decisions that didn't really fit Nicole, the more angry I became, the more hurt I became, the more guilt and shame I had. And so now I'm feeling this guilt and shame. I'm feeling stupid. I'm feeling all these different things. And then I just allow myself to get angry, and I would direct it at everything and everyone. Right? I'd start to yell at my mom, it's your fault. I blame my dad, right? I blame my brothers. I blamed everyone. I blamed my girlfriends at the time. And I relieved myself of the responsibility because I didn't have the tools. And so let's fast forward to my woke story, right? Like this part of me that begins to see that like there's needs to be some kind of change in my life, and that I needed to reach really strongly up to my creator and asked for help, and started to get that help and started to help myself. And, you know, so you get clean, you do all these different things, but the anger didn't leave. The anger was still there. And so I had to really look at this, and I started to see as my gifts are being amplified by my seeking of wanting to connect more deeply with myself, my creator, and my wife, and you guys, I started to see the different, so I'm a seer, right? So I see energies, I see ghosts, I see all kinds of things. I started to see that when I got really angry and I started to point fingers, and I was starting to take it this way instead of this way, like really just releasing it and having that discussion with my creator, with God, that I was going into a very weird frequency, a frequency that made my body feel uncomfortable. And my tongue would go numb and my face would vibrate and my arm, and I didn't understand. And I can remember that whoever I was having an argument with, like, and usually it was Dove, right? Because Dove and I are working together, living together. That's what's happening. I noticed that I would want to blame her, like, this is your fault because we're not getting along, or this and that. And I didn't realize that my anger, the anger and this pointing and blaming, this energy, this frequency that I would lock into, that I was plugging into these grid systems that were not anything close to my frequency. And it was so uncomfortable. And it had nothing to do with Dove. And it had nothing to do with the situation at hand. It had to do with that I wasn't, first of all, looking at the things that were really going on and being really truthful with myself. And I was going into this anger and almost tipping into a hatred energy, like, I hate you. Energy, could feel it. And it just not aligned with me. And it didn't feel good. And I started to see that when I would dip in those areas, that there were other frequencies and other spirits and energies that would start poking at me. And I would see them and I would go, why are you there? Because we don't just get attacked. We don't just invite these. I mean, I was going to say we do invite. There is things that we plug into or choices that we make that will invite these energies into our field because our frequency drops enough to have that frequency come in. Right? So what did I do? What did I start to do to get through this? So I realized that there was the underlying cause of the anger. And that was something that I needed to start to look at. I started to need to, so I remember when I first started doing this, I looked at Dove and she said something, and I started to get angry. Now, I gave myself this assignment that I was going to journal. I wasn't going to allow myself, for this moment, I was going to fast my anger, take my anger, put it in a different place, not take it out on anyone. So it wasn't like I was not going to express myself. I was going to express this anger, but I was going to do it in writing. I was going to do it with myself. And, you know, I had a couple of friends that I was going to talk to about it, right? So I go into the feeling of anger, and all of a sudden I'm just like, and then I stopped myself and I said, okay, why are you angry? And all of a sudden I look at her and she's like, you're not paying attention anymore. I realize you're pissed. And I said, hey, babe, I was like, I felt really stupid just now. And from feeling really stupid, I went into guilt and shame. And from guilt and shame, I started to get angry. And when I looked at that, I went, wow, this had nothing to do with anger. This had to do with just the fact that I felt stupid. And sharing that with her nipped my anger in the bud. So if you can figure out why you're angry, right? If you're angry with self for the decisions that you're making, if you're angry with others because of the way they're treating you or their relation to you, how you guys are interacting, you have the opportunity to first off see what's actually happening. And instead of going into anger, right, we get angry. I scream in front of God when I'm in prayer. Ah! I go buck nutty. I get wild, right? And I release it. But then I go down to the truth. And then I have to see, well, what do I have to do next to give myself what I need in this moment? And sometimes I need to scream. And sometimes I need to tell someone, hey, you hurt me. And sometimes I need to apologize to myself and ask for forgiveness to myself for the choices that I made that harm myself. Even if I put myself in a situation that I don't want to be in, if I do things out of expectation, whatever that looks like, I make it right with myself. I amend it with myself or somebody else. And so I really wanted to share that with you because I've been hearing, well, first I've been watching anger, attack, I've been seeing how that destroys each other and destroys self. And I wanted to give you guys something to think about and kind of an assignment to see what you could do with your anger and see if you could start to pinpoint where it's coming from. Unexpressed emotion and anger and all of these things are you know, if untreated, can turn into hatred, can turn into violence. I've been posting things about this because I see a world that's violent. And I'm doing this message right now with you and speaking to you and creating a dialogue, because if we don't change this, we will not change the violence on this planet. And they are doing lawn care now, so I'm gonna end the video. It was perfect. It was perfect. They were just like, we're done now. I love you guys so deeply. Thank you. If you love this, if you liked it, please share, please subscribe. You are worth it. You are worth it to look at yourself. You are so, so important to give yourself the time to look at these little pieces. Sometimes they seem so tedious, but when we start to do them, it becomes a part of your life, and that tedious, this work becomes just life. And so it's not work anymore. It's just being conscious and aware of yourself. And the more you are conscious and aware of yourself and the more you know about yourself, the freer you are. Love you guys. Light and love.